Hey there, vinyl community. Um, just first off, should say, I guess, Happy Father's Day to all the fathers out there. That includes me. In fact, I'm going to be going for a little bit here, go see my boys. But I was listening to some music this morning and hanging out, having a Sunday, washing clothes, and listening to some music. Listen to that. Listen to that. And I don't want to show you those yet. So this earlier again. Listen to this, really good. Listen to these two records from pretty cool. Y'all know this, Yaz or Yazoo in the UK. Their second album, pretty good. And then I even pulled this out. I haven't listened to this in a while. Uh, Pretty cool record. I still enjoy this. It's pretty good. Has a verse of they do Sweet Jane on here, the Velvet Underground's Sweet Jane. And they add the verse that is left off the original single, and it's on here. Of course, you can now, because we have the deluxe editions and stuff. You hear the original version. But I was listening to something else and trying to think of a good way of talking about it. But listening to this and listening to kind of follow-up record, Robert Johnson, and who has now become kind of American folklore, and that's kind of what I wanted to talk about. I was out last night with some people and we were talking about folklore and how important it is to kind of American history, and how so much of our history, if you're from outside the U.S., maybe this doesn't resonate as much, but things like Thanksgiving and Paul Revere, the Boston Tea Party, Custer's Last Stand, all of those pieces of American history are based on very, 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 very flimsy historical truths. In fact, you might even want to make the argument that they're a distraction. That we all know what happened to the indigenous people who were here on North America when the Europeans showed up. I mean, those people are, for the most part, other than in a few locations where people were chased, there was a genocide, and those people were wiped off the globe. And so we end up talking about, we celebrate Thanksgiving every year, and not a word about what actually happened. Instead, there's this fantasy of, that they joined sides and they shared pumpkin pie, and they shared corn and pumpkin pie, and there was this wonderful fantasy. It's fantasy. It's mythology, and it's replaced history, actual history. And you'll get people who will get very, very upset here in the States if you try to say any different, because they're so bought into the mythology. We've been taught that ever since I was a little boy. I remember the school books where it had the pilgrims. They called the pilgrims came and they shared their food with the indigenous people, and there was peace and harmony, and it's just anyway. All of that mythology reminds me of this mythology. The mythology of this young man who wants to learn how to play the guitar and goes at midnight in the Mississippi Delta and waits and waits and waits until he sees. There's different ways of telling the story, different aspects to the legend, but eventually he sees a dark stranger coming up the road, and some people describe it as that's the actual devil, and more often in the stories that I've read is that it was another lesser demon who meets Robert and teaches him, in exchange for selling his soul, teaches him to play the guitar. And then he's 21 or whatever he is at that age, and I think Woody Johnson died at 27. Seems like 27 is the magical number. But anyway, he has. But the interesting thing about it is that so Robert Johnson goes on to write these songs, and they're all, not all, but a lot of them are very much related to this story, this mythology. Hellhound on my trail, Me and the Devil Blues, and littered throughout his catalog are these references and towards this very kind of Faustian event. If you're not familiar with the story of Robert Johnson, is actually not unique, and actually goes back to a German legend, Faust, of a man selling his soul to the devil in exchange for knowledge. And it's kind of the same, like Robert Johnson. In exchange for his soul, he gets what he wants in a certain way, but he ultimately, what he gets is a burden. And really, if you look at it, it's a burden. Why this is so universal is it's a burden we all carry. It's a burden that we all have, that we all feel like we're racing against something, and we're not quite sure what it is coming. Whether it's seeking relationships, or whether it's financial, or whether it's there's the struggle of human existence, and that's in a lot of ways that's what Robert is singing about. Very universal, very very universal idea. And so when Robert says the hellhounds are on my trail, that he can feel the devil getting closer. That is the reason that that's been so appealing through the ages, is that that's something that a lot of us feel. In fact, I would go further than that. I would say it's completely universal, and it's something that we all feel to one degree or another. And it's the reason that these songs resonate so deeply with us. But it's interesting that ties into this idea that so much American history is based on these kind of legends rather than on actual historical events. And what I mean, like World War II was an actual historical event. Custer's Last Stand is a great example. There's a book that came out recently about it, talked about what kind of guy General Custer really was, and he was not a very decent man. Excuse me. And his tactic in fighting wars against the native population was to wait until the warriors went out to fight, and then he would send guards into the community and hold all the children and the women and elderly people hostage. And then he would send a note to the leader of the indigenous population, and tell them that we're going to slaughter these people unless you're elderly and your females and your children, unless you surrender. And to prove that he was not a man of his word, he did it, and he actually did slaughter groups of children and of women. So Custer's Last Stand has a very very different meaning if you actually read. But what happened was they took that horrible story and turned it into this story of Custer the brave, the strong, and it just shows you how manipulated we are sometimes, and we should be leery of basing too much on these legends. There's a lot of knowledge to be gotten from legends and from other books that tell stories of whales swallowing people, and there's a lot of historical things that we can read from that. But we should be somewhat leery in looking too deeply um, for honesty in these kind of stories, because they're often based on very, very flimsy um, information and historical information. Anyway, just a quick one. Robert Johnson, amazing. I love this kind of blues. I'm not a big. I wish I knew more. I like this kind of like folk blues, I guess you call it. Acoustic folk blues. Very closely related to like folk music, or if you're familiar with the Anthology of American Folk Music, reminds me of when I was really into Dylan, and that this is kind of carrying on, uh, some of that tradition. But these are great records too. I think all of the songs that Johnson ever recorded are on these two albums, and it's a quick way to get them. I've heard people say that there are, like Blind Willie, and there's other people who are who are better guitar players and better vocalists than Robert was, and that may be. I think those songs sound great, and not because those songs are great, not because Led Zeppelin or the Rolling Stones or whoever, Cream or whoever, covered those songs or stole those songs. Um, they're great on their own. In fact, they're greater on their own than they were when that legend became something that was really cool in rock star circles to be associated with. Anyway, folks, there's a quick one on Father's Day, and we'll talk to you soon. Thanks.